Good morning. Today is Friday the 14th of July. Today we are in Mark's Gospel chapter 10. We're going to look at verses 46 through 52. Word of God says, Now they came to Jericho, and as he, meaning Jesus, went out of Jericho with his disciples, a great multitude. Blind Bartimaeus, the son of Timaeus, sat by the road begging. And when he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to cry out and say, Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me. Then many warned him to be quiet, but he cried out all the more, Son of David, have mercy on me. So Jesus stood still and commanded him to be called. Then they called the blind man, saying to him, Be of good cheer, arise, he is calling you. And throwing aside his garment, he rose and came to Jesus. So Jesus answered and said to him, What do you want me to do for you? The blind man said to him, Rabboni, that I may receive my sight. Then Jesus said to him, Go your way, your faith has made you well. And immediately he received his sight and followed Jesus on the road. The story of blind Bartimaeus. Now this account doesn't give us a lot of information about him. Basically, we're given his name, and he's the son of Timaeus. He lives in Jericho. And he hears that Jesus is walking by, and he begins crying out to him, Son of David, have mercy on me. So just looking at this passage, what do we see? We see Jesus is in Jericho. He's walking out of the city. His disciples are following him. A great crowd of people are following him. And this man is sitting there by the side of the road begging. He's blind. He can't see what's going on, but he hears. And it says that when he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, when he heard it was Jesus of Nazareth, he calls out. He begins to shout, to raise his voice above the din of the crowd. And he calls out to God with every fiber of his being. And Jesus stops. It says Jesus stood still and commanded him to be called. Jesus doesn't spit on the ground. He doesn't rub mud in the guy's eyes. He doesn't spit in his eyes. He doesn't do any of that stuff like he's done it previously. He just says to the man, Go your way, your faith has made you well. And immediately he receives his sight and follows Jesus on the road. So that's what this says. Now, how do we apply it to our life? Well, let's ask the questions. Let's apply the specs. SPECT. S, is there any sin for us to forsake? P, is there any promise to claim or principle to apply to our life? E, any example to learn from? C, any command to obey? T, anything to be thankful for? Is there any sin mentioned in this passage? There's not a sin mentioned. But I do observe one thing that's a little bit here's Jesus' disciples and this crowd of people following Jesus. And here's a man who has a need, blind Bartimaeus. And when he starts crying out for Jesus, they tell him to be quiet. Don't bother him. That bothers me. I don't know about you. But you know, I think sometimes we can, in our mind, be following Jesus. But when we see a need over here, instead of bringing them to Jesus, we fail to do so. That's the only thing I can say about this passage, that as far as sin to forsake, we excuse me, felt that thing sneaking up on me. We need to be mindful of the needs of those around us, because there's people that are hurting all around us, and oftentimes ironically, we turn a blind eye. But here's blind Bartimaeus. I don't really see a sin for us to forsake in this passage, other than being blind to the needs of those around us. What about principles to apply to our life? Well, the man calls out to Jesus, and Jesus heard him. Jesus stopped. I love the fact that we have a God who's not far off. We have a God who is who hears us, and I think that that understanding. There are many times in our life, and I know from my own experience, and I assume most people, we all go through times when we feel alone, where we feel like no one hears us or no one sees us. You can be all alone in a crowd of people, and that's a terrible feeling. But knowing that God heard that one voice from the crowd that was calling out to him, that's a principle that we need to understand, that we have a God who hears us. It's also something to be thankful for, but we'll get there. What about examples to learn from? Well, we see the example of the disciples in the crowd trying to hush the man up, for example. We see the example of blind Bartimaeus. When he heard that Jesus was passing by, he calls out. He calls upon the Lord. And that's an example for us. In our time of need, call out to God. What about the example of Jesus? He heard the man with the need. He stopped. He dealt with the man with the need. And that's the example we should follow. Ministering to those in need around us. What about commands to obey? I don't see a command here, other than Jesus saying, "Bring the man here." And that might be something we could apply to our life, that we have been given the Great Commission to bring people to Jesus, do the work of an evangelist, share the good news, so forth, so on. But that may be a stretch to read into that. But what about T, the letter T, inspect? Is there anything to be thankful for? Thankful. Here's a man. All we know about Bartimaeus, we know his father's name, and we know he was blind. And he calls out to Jesus and he gets healed. But God included him in his holy scriptures. I'm thankful that God is not a respecter of persons. He doesn't just include the affluent, the well-to-do, the popular. He includes the ordinary people. I'm thankful for that. I'm also thankful that he's a God who hears me when I cry. And I'm thankful that we also see the example of Bartimaeus in that he, after he receives his sight, he follows Jesus. Jesus said, if anyone wants to be my disciple, he must deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. Well, Bartimaeus, as soon as he receives his sight, he begins to follow Jesus. I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful for God restoring my sight, not physically, but spiritually, right? Many years ago when I called upon the Lord to save me. That's all I have for today. Listen, I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Hope you can come out to church on Sunday at Pleasant Hill. We're going to be getting a summer series on the book of Zechariah. So I'm excited about that. So have a blessed day. We'll see you again on Monday.